It's the way to go. Eat a fig, not a pig. Let your kindness show. If it's your wig or a jig or a swig, do you dig? Big. It's the way to go. It's Big Fat Vegan Radio.
When something's fat, there's a lot to show. It's gotta be fat to help the movement grow. Making fat loud chant that won't be flat. It's fat. And here's our show. It's Big Fat Vegan Radio.
I've just got that vegan glow, like a drag queen calling Patrick Goudreau. I'm a YouTube vegan cooking up good eating. Veganism makes me glow. It's Big Fat Vegan Radio.
All right, vegans, all together now. When something's fat, there's a lot to show. It's gotta be fat to help the movement grow. Making fat loud chant that won't be flat. It's fat.
It's the way to go.
It's Big Fat Vegan Radio.
Hey everyone, welcome to Big Fat Vegan Radio. We are podcasting from San Francisco and New York City to discuss veganism in all of its glory. I am Ben Strothman, otherwise known as Honey LeBronx, everyone's favorite vegan drag queen, and I am here without Laura Yaz, vegan writer and entertainment know-it-all. You can check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube by searching for Big Fat Vegan Radio. And you can follow along with our show notes at bigfatveganradio.com. As you know, Laura and I are doing separate interviews now, so we can double our content. So I hope we're not overwhelming you with too many awesome episodes. But today, bear with us, we've got one more awesome interview for you guys. Isn't that right, Laura? Laura? Oh, that's right. She ain't here. So anyway, I interviewed a good friend of mine, Rina Deych. She is an animal activist extraordinaire. Rina, I'm going to read her bio here. It's not me saying her age. She is proudly saying her own age. Rina Deych is 57 years old and has been a registered nurse for 34 years. She says she became a nurse because she can't stand to see anyone suffering without doing something to help. It's the same reason she's a vegan and does animal rescue and wildlife rehabilitation. She has lived in Borough Park, Brooklyn for most of her life, except for 2.5 years she lived in Israel as a child and 2 years in Arizona as an adolescent. She's been a member of dozens of animal rights organizations since the 1980s and is on the Advisory Committee of Jewish Vegetarians of North America and is one of the founding members of the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos. Kaporos, you're going to learn more about what this is. It's a Jewish custom, not widely practiced in Judaism, not practiced by all sects or subsets of Judaism, but it is something that is practiced here and there where live chickens are sacrificed for this ritual. It's going to be kind of hard to listen to because it can be a little graphic what you're going to hear, what goes on. But please, this is a long interview and it's going to be a sad interview. But I urge you to listen to the whole thing so that you can get better informed and so that you can learn what you can help do about this, whether or not this is something that goes on where you live. With that said, there's a quote from Gretchen Weiler, the founder of the Genesis Awards. It's sort of like the Oscars of animal rights. It's an award ceremony for people who use their celebrity to bring attention to animal causes. Gretchen Weiler, the founder of that awards ceremony, once said, "We must not deny with our own eyes what the animals must endure with their bodies." And with that said, I would love to welcome Rina Deych to Big Fat Vegan Radio. Rina, welcome to Big Fat Vegan Radio.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for making time for us. You know, I wanted to get you on the show as soon as possible because you have some really exciting and even more than exciting, some really serious and kind of heartbreaking events coming up that I really want our listeners to know about. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself? We would love to hear about why you're vegan, how you went vegan,
Sure. I have been vegetarian for almost 29 years.
Wow.
And vegan for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I am a registered nurse, and the reason I became a nurse was because I can't stand to see anybody suffer without trying to help them somehow. I'm a vegan for the same reason. After seeing horrific footage from slaughterhouses and fur farms and research labs, I had to do something to not be part of that torture. I have been an animal rescuer my whole life. Both my mother and my grandfather rescued animals since as long as I can remember. My grandfather was an Orthodox Jew who had a butcher store. He had a meat store, one of the first in Borough Park in the 1920s. He never made the connection to other animals, like he always assured me since I was 8 years old and asking questions. He assured me that the animals led a good life and that they were killed with the swiftest stroke of the sharpest blade, and he really believed that until one day when he had to visit a slaughterhouse in the 1970s. He came home crying.
Oh.
And he couldn't even speak about what he had seen. He was so overwhelmed. And he immediately stopped eating meat, and very soon after that gave up his business. He sold his business. He was very disillusioned. He was very upset, and he could not believe the horrific things he saw in the slaughterhouse. That, of course, made me question my own meat eating, but because he never described to me what he saw because he didn't want to upset me, I really didn't know, and I knew he saw terrible things, but I blocked it out. I just became, blissfully ignorant and said, you know what, one day I know I'm going to be vegetarian, but I can't even think about it now, because as soon as I would think about it, I would get so upset, I would just have palpitations and start sweating, and I couldn't think about the animal suffering. So I just really blocked it out, and I think that's what many people do.
Yeah. Wow. It's like, it's like I always used to say, if it's worth doing, it's worth procrastinating.
Exactly, exactly. And we do, unfortunately, as human beings, we have that capacity to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
We can actually shut out certain files in our brain and just sort of file them away in a file cabinet and decide not to think about them.
Yeah. I just posted something last night on Facebook about quitting smoking. I quit cigarettes 5 years, 7 months, and 23 days ago, and saved $45,000, but who's counting? And it's funny because I always used to say, well, I know I'm going to quit smoking one day, so why does it have to be today? If I know I'm going to eventually quit, I may as well enjoy it today, because one day, future Ben will come along and save the day.
I said the same thing when I was smoking.
Yeah.
And now for me it's been 28 years since I quit.
I cannot picture you with a cigarette. That's funny.
3 packs a day. I was insane. I was crazy. I have asthma, and now I have COPD because of it.
What is COPD?
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
Oh, wow.
It's like emphysema.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I smoked 2 packs a day. Not for very long, but
me too.
for at least a year, I was up to 2 packs a day. but I had probably, I'd been an on and off smoker. It's like a lot of people who, wow, we're talking about smoking somehow, but it's like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just a casual smoker. I just smoke now and then. But one day, some life event is going to happen, and you're going to make the association that a cigarette will help you get through that. And every time you do it, it's like I used to do with drugs and alcohol. Every time I'd have a cigarette, it was like hitting the snooze button on having to feel the pain. It was one more thing to put the distance between me and the pain. And that pain will always be there waiting for you, And one day, I had a breakup with an ex that I couldn't handle. And I couldn't handle the ex or the breakup, but that's a different interview. And that was the day that I just turned into a chain smoker. So at any rate, it's the same way, we get this information, it's like you were saying, he would tell you when you started to think about what happened to the animals, your heart would race and you would start to perspire. You started to have a visceral reaction to what you were hearing.
Exactly.
And for so long, rather than doing something about that, you just blocked it out. We have a lot of listeners who are not yet vegan. And hey, I think it's awesome that they're listening. I think it's awesome that as non-vegans or as not yet vegans or as future vegans, they still want this information. But
it's wonderful.
What do you say as someone who used to be vegetarian, or as someone who used to even eat meat, but you were conscious of all that your uncle told you?
My grandfather.
Or your grandfather told you.
Yeah. What did it for me was seeing the Animals film in the early 1980s. I saw the Animals film where it was right in front of my face. I saw scenes from slaughterhouses and fur farms and research labs, and I was trembling. I was just hugging my dog. I couldn't, I was just totally shell-shocked. I couldn't believe that I was responsible for such suffering.
Yeah.
That by eating meat and by wearing leather and by, wearing fur, which years ago I did, that I was responsible for such horrific cruelty. And then, of course, I proceeded to tell other people. As a nurse, I would bring them information. When I would interview my patients, I would ask them what kind of diet they were on. That was part of the initial intake, the, formal intake that we would do. And when they would say, oh, I eat everything, and I would say, even meat? Do you know that blah, 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 blah? And I would give all the health reasons and all the ethical reasons that it's bad to eat meat. And I would do that with dairy and eggs also. And, I just didn't fully, I wasn't 100% vegan at that point, but I was working on it. Yeah. And I think that's important to remember, that we don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
We can have this vision of ourselves that we aspire to be, and we try to get as close to that, ideal as possible.
Yeah.
We work towards it every day, just like we never stop learning. We're constantly evolving, and we try to become better people. So I think anything somebody does to cut down on cruelty in their daily lives is a positive thing and deserves to be rewarded. I think that, deserves, positive mention and praise.
Well, speaking of deserving positive mention and praise, Rina takes it a lot further than just cutting down on her daily cruelty intake. It's often said that a vegan, I just watched the movie Bold Native recently, and at the end of the movie there's a little title frame that comes up saying, a vegan saves at least 90 lives per year. Now, I think it's more to the point to say a vegan spares 90 lives a year. But in Rina's case, you gotta double or triple that number, because Rina goes out of her way to help animals. Could you tell us a bit about that? How, once upon a time you used to eat animals, then you stopped eating animals. When did you take it to the next level that you started doing so much outreach? And could you tell us a bit about the outreach that you do?
Well, I've always rescued animals, even before I stopped eating them. My grandfather rescued cats and dogs and birds who fell out of their nests. He was very compassionate. As I said in the beginning, he just didn't extend that compassion to the animals he was cutting up for meat. Mm-hmm. However, ultimately he did, but that's beside the point. My mother also rescued animals. In fact, my grandfather used to allow homeless people to stay in our home until they could get their own jobs and get their own SROs, single room occupancies, and get on their own feet. So we were always about rescue. But as I said, in the 1980s, when I began to become aware of what farm animals are going through and fur animals, I got involved with many animal rights groups. I got involved in Trans-Species Unlimited and anti-vivisection groups like Suppress and the Medical Research Modernization Committee. Then I got involved with Farm Sanctuary and was their New York coordinator for the farm walks for a brief period. I also did lectures in colleges about farm animals, about veal, foie gras, various issues. Wow. And so I've been involved with many, many groups. At this point, I am on the advisory committee of Jewish Vegetarians of North America, and I'm one of the founding members of the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, which is an offshoot of United Poultry Concerns.
Okay.
I also do vegan tables, and I'm involved with Our Planet Dares Too. And every year for the past several years, we've been doing National Animal Rights Day. So we get a bunch of different groups together who are tabling and presenting, and we have music and food, vegan food, and it's just a nice little sort of festival where we educate people, but we also introduce them to interesting vegan options and show them really how easy it is to be vegan.
So I'm just adjusting the way I'm sitting. All of our listeners know that I'm literally sitting in bed when I record these, and I'm sitting cross-legged, and you know that you're a certain age when you can't sit in the same position for more than like 10 minutes without being in excruciating pain.
That's true.
But so you mentioned one of the key things I wanted to talk to you about today, which is the the use of chickens, the use of live chickens as Kaporos. Now, I'm not Jewish. I don't know much about, Jewish faith or customs or rituals, but I learned about this event from you. Before I ever met you, Rina, I became aware of you on YouTube back when I was newly vegan. And, Colleen Patrick Goudreau talks about like the 10 stages, I think, of going vegan. And how, like, the first stage is, like, you just want to gobble up all the information you can to sort of confirm what you're discovering. You're like, oh, my God, I can't believe this is what goes on in the world. I want to know more and more and more. And somewhere along the line, either I saw them on Facebook, or I think YouTube started suggesting your videos to me based on the other stuff I was watching. And, I was a little starstruck the day I finally met you in person. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but like, just so our listeners can get an idea, and I definitely want to post some of these videos in the show notes so that our listeners can go and watch them for themselves. But the first impression I ever had of Rina, you don't see Rina in the video, you just see her point of view as the person holding the video camera. Rina is just a petite little, she's like a little like strawberry shortcake figurine. She's like this adorable thing that's just like walking into the eye of the storm, armed with a camcorder, and you see this unspeakable ritual going on. You can hear the chickens screaming. If you've never heard a chicken scream before, I mean, they absolutely scream. You know that it's in pain. You know that it's terrified. And you see all these people looking at her like she is this, obtrusive invader. Like, how dare you be here? How dare you be, doing this? And I remember seeing, like men like chasing you away and, and telling you, how dare you? And then like one of them actually like threw a box at you. And you're just standing your ground and asserting yourself. And that was the day I was like, this woman is my hero. And I started watching all of your videos. I started showing them to Michael Hare, and I'm like, Michael, you gotta see this woman. She is badass. She's just... And the first day I met you in person, I was expecting I thought I'd be meeting like Xena Warrior Princess, but Rina is this absolutely angelic looking woman with jet black hair, and you just look like you are glowing. Like, if I've ever seen the glow of compassion in someone, you've got it. So,
thank you.
It was just such an honor to meet you. And when I had my first opportunity to do so, I got involved in one of your End Chickens as Kaporos protests. And it was one of the first opportunities I had as a vegan to show up to something and to really demonstrate against it. So could you tell us a bit about this ritual? Who is behind this ritual? Why do they do it? Why chickens? To someone who doesn't know what this is, could you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, it's called Kaporos. That is the Eastern European or Yiddish pronunciation of the word. Kaparot is the Hebrew pronunciation. But, because there are many ways to spell it since it's a Hebrew word. It means atonements, and it's a custom in which either a chicken or a sack of money is swung over the head or waved over the head of the practitioner. They recite a certain passage that says basically, this is my exchange, my substitute, my atonement. This rooster or hen, if it's a female practitioner, shall go to its death, but I shall go to a good long life and to peace. Now, what they believe is that their sins go into the chicken, and then when the chicken is killed, they're supposed to watch that and feel that that could have been me, so I have to be careful now not to sin. This happens during the entire week from Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, through to the beginning of Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. The thing about this is that it came about in the Middle Ages, and it's believed to have been stolen from pagan rituals, because animal sacrifice in Judaism was stopped after the destruction of the temple. Animal sacrifice used to be done inside the temple and only by priests. But after the destruction of the temple, they developed prayer, which was used instead of animal sacrifice.
Wow.
So, and this ritual is not mentioned in the Torah, which is the Bible or the Old Testament, or the Talmud. And those are the two of the main, Jewish religious works. And it was actually written down in during the Middle Ages in a volume called Shulchan Aruch, which means literally the set table. And it's supposed to be a guide how to live a righteous life as a Jew. Mm-hmm. And when it was mentioned by Rabbi Cairo, Joseph Cairo, who was one of the authors of this volume, he called it a foolish custom. And the reason he did that, and many great sages agreed with him thereafter, was because, first of all, it is not necessary to do this. If you could get rid of your sins before Yom Kippur, what would be the purpose of Yom Kippur, which, is in the Torah? Okay? There would be nothing to atone for. So it doesn't make sense. Now, I can tell you the way it's practiced in this day and age, which I found out about only 20 years ago. I didn't realize that people were still doing it. And when I saw it, I just couldn't believe it. And I started going around to these places and handing out articles asking people to please use money instead of chickens, explaining that this was not necessary for them to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I saw this, I started to pay attention to how it was done. These chickens were kept in crates, stacked up to 10 high, with like 12 chickens in a crate. In all kinds of weather, they were left out for the entire week. They weren't given any food or water. The chickens below the top layer of chickens had urine and feces falling down on them. Many of them just died in the crates of starvation and dehydration and exposure, because sometimes it was cold, sometimes it was hot, and they had no covering, no shelter whatsoever. When practitioners finally grabbed them out of the crates, they would yank them out by the wings with their wings pinned back. Now, first of all, one thing you have to know is that these are broiler chickens. They are fed hormones and steroids, and they're bred to be very heavy so that they look like full-grown chickens. Yeah. But if you listen to their voices crying, they're little peeping sounds.
Yeah.
Chickens have a big clucking sound. These are babies. When they're grabbed by their wings, they're petrified and in pain. And many times, because of the way they're grabbed, the wings break. So not only is it painful to be held by the wings, because their bodies were never meant to support, the wings were never meant to support their bodies. That's why chickens can't fly very high, especially these chickens. But imagine if, on top of that, these wings are broken. So not only is that unimaginably cruel, but it also makes the bird what they call treif, which means unkosher. Because, you see, practitioners justify doing this by saying, well, we give the birds, the meat, to the poor. Now, I know for a fact, by watching this for decades, that more often than not, these birds, both alive, dying, they've had their throats cut, but they're not dead yet, are thrown into garbage bags and then thrown into dumpsters and discarded. Yeah. Nobody could ever eat these birds because they're covered with urine and feces.
I was
and
just
going to
say. These. First off, a lot of the birds that people eat, a lot of these broiler chickens, as we call them, they're fed such a strong dose of antibiotics for their whole lives. But these chickens that you've described haven't even received food or water, so of course they're not getting antibiotics either. And they're covered in feces and urine. These are sick birds. Why would you want to feed these to anyone,
Right. And many of them have open sores. Like you can look through the crates and see them bleeding, or they have pus coming out of their wounds. Yeah. Because they're in such tight quarters, their feathers rub against each other, and it causes ulcerations and infections. So, no, nobody could possibly eat these birds. And even if they did donate that, first of all, the idea that these birds are sin-filled, how could you even,
Right.
give a sin-filled bird to somebody else? The whole thing doesn't make sense. And the fact is, we have a mandate in the Torah. It's called Tsa'ar Ba'alei Chaim. It means not to cause unnecessary harm to animals and to treat them with compassion. The way this is done, this ritual violates that mandate. Not only that, but there is a mandate in the Talmud that says, feed your animals before you feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, that's violated as well, because these animals, for the most part, never get fed at all.
Yeah.
I saw, of all the dozens of places that I go to every year, only one was taking them out, taking the birds out and feeding them. Mm-hmm. One other place was taking handfuls of challah, which is a Jewish bread, and dipping it in water and just breaking it up and throwing it on top of the crates, so that only a few lucky birds got a little morsel of food, because that's going on top of 10 crates high, so most of that is falling to the bottom, and by the time it gets to the bottom, it's covered with urine and feces.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, they're not feeding their animals, and it's violating that mandate.
It just shows what they think about the birds. I mean, it's like they look at these instructions that they think are written in these books, and they think, oh, well, I've satisfied that instruction there. I fed them. But they don't care enough to actually make sure that the birds are fed in a respectful and proper manner.
Right. It's really horrendous.
Yeah.
And another mandate that it violates is the one not to waste. And clearly, most of these birds are discarded. I just read an article. Unfortunately, I don't remember the exact number, but I'm going to send you the link so that you can post it, where tens of thousands of chickens last year in L.A. were thrown into a landfill. These are chickens who were used for the ritual there in L.A. So we have absolute proof that is what is happening to many of these birds.
Yeah. Just to give our listeners a visual, when I hear a crate, when you say that they are in crates, 12 to a crate,
right.
I naturally, as an optimist, I want to believe, these crates, they're kind of like the size of, like a dog cage, but big enough for 12. So I'm picturing a really big crate. Now, having actually been there in person, the best thing I can describe it as is, Rina, have you ever seen a McDonald's when the truck is outside and they're loading in all of the inventory, and
Yes.
they'll have these big yellow pallets, like these,
Yes.
it's on coasters, and all these square yellow pallets with like the little hamburger buns on them.
Right.
They're maybe 6 or 8 inches high. They're about maybe 3 feet by 3 feet wide. And that is what these crates look like. It looks like
Right.
the McDonald's hamburger bun tower coming off the truck.
They're a little bit taller, maybe 10 inches tall, 8 to 10 inches tall,
Yeah.
and maybe a little bit smaller, maybe not quite 3 feet, maybe about 2 feet.
And
by
when you
2
see
feet.
one of these, I can't believe it's only 12 chickens stuffed into one, because they look so crowded. And then you'll see these stacked at least 10 crates high. I mean, I'm about 6'1", and these look like they come up to about my eye level. So I mean,
Yes.
that has to be it has to be at least 5 feet tall. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at one little yellow tower of crates, you've easily got 150 hens in this space that is basically as big as my person,
Exactly.
And just standing 20 feet away from one of these crates. I remember I was at a protest 2 years ago, and we were standing just downwind of this crate. And the entire time I knew I was getting sick because the smell of ammonia. If you've ever changed a cat litter box and you smell the ammonia that results from the cat's urine, imagine that you are standing downwind of 150 urine-soaked hens. The smell of ammonia is so powerful. And that's me standing 20, 30 feet away from it. I can only imagine the hen in the middle of that cage. What that hen, who has a very sensitive respiratory system, what that hen is being subjected to and how painful that must be.
Right. It's awful. It's horrible. The thing about this ritual is that there are children watching this. This happens out in the open in the street. Mm-hmm. And once the chicken is grabbed and supposedly a female chicken is used for a female person and a male rooster is used for a man, they are then, they say this passage, and then they give the chicken back. Either the chicken is put back into a crate to be slaughtered a little bit later, or he's handed directly to the slaughterer. Now, they're slaughtered right out in the open and right in front of children of all ages. I have heard children say to their parents, they cry the first time they see this. Mm-hmm. They cry and they say, Mommy, the birds are crying. And the parents tell them, the birds are not crying. They're singing. They're happy to do this for
mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they don't like me very much because if it's within my earshot, I tell them, no, sweetheart, you're right. The birdie is crying. She's hurting. She's in pain. And, naturally the parents pull the kid away immediately.
Yeah.
But I've also heard, see, what happens when they do hand the bird over to the slaughterer is they lean the bird back, they bend the bird back, and so that the neck is exposed, and they cut the bird's neck. And they take the bird and put the bird in this inverted cone, like, the cones they use, the hazard cones that you see in the street.
Yeah.
Well, they invert them, and they let the blood drain out, and then usually, even before the blood is fully drained out, they throw them into garbage bags. Now, the bird is still struggling, and I have heard parents say to the kids, oh, don't worry, the bird is dead once the cut is made. Like, oh no, the shochet cut the bird is dead. And I come in and I say, oh, no. See, the bird is still alive and in pain and terrified and trying to fly away. Yeah. The only way that would be reflex is if they cut the brainstem. So, for example, when somebody is beheaded, that is immediate. Mm-hmm. And, then they feel no pain and they're dead, and any movement you see in the body or eyes is reflex. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if the brainstem is not cut, they're very much awake and alert until they lose consciousness and ultimately die from exsanguination, from losing blood.
Having been there with you, Rina, the first year I went to this protest, I wasn't actually witness to the ritual itself. It was, I forget exactly what was going on that day. They were all out there, out in the open, but there were no actual chickens, at least not that I could see.
Right.
It was sort of like, the Jets versus the Sharks in West Side Story. It's like they were out and we were out. And I didn't see any of the protesting going on. But I remember I had never witnessed this in my life. You had sent me a Facebook invitation. I don't think I'd ever met you yet in person. I just seen the YouTube videos, and I came out with the sign that just said, "Why do the chickens deserve this?" And, no disrespect to anyone else who showed up, but, a lot of individuals who care very much about the animals, they came out and they would protest in their own way. A lot of the people were kind of yelling back at the people. A lot of people on our side were sort of like yelling and really strongly protesting, but I chose just to go with a sign that said, "Why do the chickens deserve this?" And I stood very calm and very quiet, and I waited for people to come up and talk to me. And of course, they were very argumentative. They would raise a certain point. I would answer their question, or I would sort of offer my side. And often they would interrupt me, or they would get very argumentative with me. Well, there was one guy I'll never forget. I almost wish we had stayed Facebook friends, but he came up to me and he was very calm as he was talking to me about this. And that's one of the points that I made. I said, when you first saw this, when you were a kid, this had to scare you, right? And he's like, well, yeah, the first time I saw it as a kid, it was really scary to me. And I said, and from there, you had to go through some kind of, I don't know how to say it without using the term brainwashing, but I'm like, your parents had to justify it to you some way. Your parents had to make you believe this was okay, right? He's like, well, yeah, and that's why it doesn't bother me today. And I said to him, if that was not true, if what your parents told you was not true, then what would you say about all of this killing? And he thought for a moment and he said, well, if that weren't true, then I guess all this killing is really cruel and unnecessary. And at that moment, I had to control my face because I'm like, Ben, don't smirk, don't smile. Because I'm like, I got one. But,
yeah.
But I love that I was able to get through to this one guy and get him to think outside of the box,
That's fantastic.
I have a box that I think inside of. I have my own set of what I believe is true. And every day that I can think outside that box, every day that someone shakes that box or pokes a hole in it, that is a gift for me to be able to think openly, think fresh, and
grow.
One of the things that this guy said to me is, he and I would be having a conversation, and then someone else would come up to me and they would interrupt he and I. That's not bad. That's not good grammar. They would interrupt him and me. It's accusative. It's not nominative. There we go. And he would stop the guy from interrupting. He'd be like, "Wait a minute! Don't be disrespectful. This guy's, he would say, this guy's one of the good ones. He's not whatever." And one
That's
of the people,
fantastic.
I have to say to anyone else who ever chooses to protest, what has often really served me when I show up to protest or demonstrate or leaflet is I have to keep yes, if I were there acting on my own feelings, I would be screaming. I would be furious. It would be hard for me not to get, not in a hurtful way, but violently emotional. And I have to realize in that situation, it's not going to help them better hear or understand or open up to me. But this guy, we had a wonderful conversation. I don't know that I changed his mind, but I do think I got him to effectively understand where I'm coming from. I got him to listen to some new information, which definitely contradicted what he believed. But and this is the point I'm trying to make, is that during my conversation with him, every now and then, like, someone would come up to him and kind of like mutter something into his ear and keep walking. And after that happened, he said to me, he's like, they're really afraid that I'm talking to you right now. They don't like that you and I are engaged in any kind of conversation.
Wow.
And they want me to stop talking to you.
Wow.
There's a lot of fear in this community.
Yes.
And I don't mean the Jewish community as a whole. I don't understand, from one religion to the next, but as I understand, there's a lot of different sects, a lot of different communities that interpret the religion in their own way. They interpret these doctrines in their own way. And it's really threatening to one group when someone comes along and offers information that is not in line with their messaging. And lastly, rather than talking a blue streak, that was the first year I went. It was a really wonderful opportunity because I really got to talk to people and have good conversations. And somehow, stupidly, I thought that would just be the same case the next time. Well, a year later, this is now 2 years ago, I was at another protest with you. This is the first time I saw the ritual happening firsthand. And, the cops were there trying to keep the peace, but the cops were really much more on their side than ours. And the cops kept telling me, hey, just move along, move along. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm on the sidewalk. I'm within my rights. And there was these 3 young girls, maybe 3 or 4 young girls. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to stay calm and we'll be able to have a conversation. Well, these 4 young girls were very, not that they owe me any respect because I'm a grown-up, but they were very, mouthy and very, mouthing off to me. You know how, when someone's talking to you and they feel very, self-righteous because they know that they're right, they're not open to the idea they might not be right. And even as she was talking to me, she kind of had her hands on her hips and she's swinging her head back and forth, kind of like, oh, I got you right where I want you. She's telling me off rather than listening to me. And I said, I feel right now like it's 4 against 1. I don't feel we're able to have a fair exchange and a fair conversation. But if you are open to a conversation, I would love to talk and hear each other out. And the main point that this girl and I could not get past was she kept saying, you don't understand, you don't understand. When they make the cut, the guy who makes this incision knows precisely what he's doing. The blade, oh, it's so sharp. It makes this cut. There's no pain. The bird is killed instantly. It feels no pain. And I said to them, I'm like, what? My favorite question to ask anyone is, what if you were wrong? If you were wrong about this, then what? And I couldn't get this girl to contemplate, but I told her, okay, so you are commanded to do no suffering, to cause no pain, to cause no harm. Okay, let's say for a second that this chicken isn't being hurt when you cut its neck. I don't agree with that, but let's assume that you're correct in that. What about the mental anguish? What about the stress? What about the days with no food and water and the exposure? What about breathing in all the ammonia and the urine? What about all this stress and suffering and other, and
right.
You can tell when I'm talking to her that she knows that I'm right, but she won't answer that question. Even the adults, even some of the practitioners I've talked to, they always just kind of shrug their shoulders like, nah. Well, the world's not perfect. Well, what do you want from me, Right.
What she's been exposed to that probably since she was a toddler. Mm-hmm. And what happens, I consider this child abuse, that they expose children to this, and then on top of that, they lie about it. And what happens to the kid, I believe, is that they grow up not trusting their own instincts.
Yes. I think that can be true of anyone, who is raised to participate in animal suffering in whatever way.
Right. You are just, like you said, brainwashed.
Yeah.
And we have that, again, we have that capacity to turn certain things off.
Yeah.
They have turned off their compassion switch.
Yeah. It is very much a switch, because the day that I went vegan and I turned on that switch, I thought that light of compassion would illuminate my vision to food. And that's it. But the day I flipped that switch, I started seeing things that I didn't think I would see. I started seeing leather. I started seeing clothing and entertainment and animal experimentation. And it's not to be all or nothing about animal rights and veganism, but it is an all or nothing issue. Once you flip that switch of compassion, it can't be compartmentalized. Right,
exactly. I also want to make it clear about this ritual that most secular Jews don't even know this is going on.
Interesting.
Most of them have, maybe many of them have heard about it, but they think that it probably went away during the Middle Ages, like it was something done in the Middle Ages and it was left there. When I tell most Jews about this, they cannot believe that this is still going on in this day and age. And I want to make it clear that the groups of Jews doing this originated, this is an Eastern European thing, where There are two main types of Jews. One are the Eastern Europeans, the Russians. Those are called Ashkenazi Jews. Then there are the Sephardic Jews, and they are from the Arabic countries, from Spain. You know, they pronounce the Hebrew the way Hebrew is spoken now in Israel. They use the Sephardic pronunciation. Whereas the Ashkenazim, the Orthodox Ashkenazim, they have a completely different pronunciation. Many of the letters are pronounced differently. Mm-hmm. This is mainly an Ashkenazi practice. It's mainly a European practice.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it's mainly done by certain sects of Hasidim, and not even by all members of those sects. So I can say there are many different sects within the movement, the Hasidic movement, but let's say, for example, one of the sects is the Satmar. But I know some Satmar people who live in my neighborhood of Borough Park who do not use chickens, they use money. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the thing about this ritual, is that when it was written down in this volume, the person who was writing it said you can use a sack of money instead of a chicken. Mm-hmm. And then donate the money to charity. Now, frankly, that's just a lot better than donating a sick, tortured, bird who's been, horrifically treated and horribly, cruelly killed, who really nobody should eat anyway. It's much better to donate money. And that's what my grandfather did. I mean, he thought this ritual was ridiculous. When I first learned about it and asked him about it, he said, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to use a chicken. He said, there's no reason to do that. It's not in the Torah or the Talmud, and it's unnecessary. That goes against Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim. So, yeah, but it's a very small percentage of Jews who do this. However, it's my understanding that 60,000 chickens were killed in 2012 for this ritual in Brooklyn alone. Now, this ritual happens in little pockets around the world wherever there are practitioners, wherever there are these certain sects who do it with chickens. And Chabad is one of the main... Chabad is a Hasidic sect, and it is the one sect the main sect, actually, that proselytizes. So what Chabad does, Chabad is also called Lubavitch, and what they do is they try to find secular Jews and bring them back to Orthodox Judaism, reintroduce them to the Torah and the Talmud and, the religious ways, and get them to go to the synagogue and to pray, etc. So Chabad is one of the main practitioners throughout the world of this ritual using chickens. And there are pockets of Jews, and Chabad is all over wherever there are Jews in the world, and that includes China and India and Thailand. Everywhere, in every country, there are Jews, albeit probably a small percentage, but still, this is basically being done all over the world.
So I've got a question, one question just going back to what we said earlier, and then I want to follow up with where this goes on elsewhere in the world. So it says they can do this with chickens or money.
Right.
Why aren't they using money?
When I have asked practitioners that very question, they usually tell me, well, it's better to do it with a chicken because that's the first thing mentioned in the book.
Okay.
That's their rationale. And they say it's a more visceral experience. Like you're supposed to watch the chicken die. It makes it more intense to remind you not to sin. That's what I'm told.
Don't you think it would be, not to mock this, not to mock
Yeah.
anyone's beliefs, don't you think, okay, if once a year I have to grab some chicken that I care nothing for and slit its throat, that's not really a big price to pay to remind me not to sin, as it would be if I had to budget for once a year, like, oh, that's right, my sins are going to cost me my hard-earned money that I had to work for. I'm going to lose a day's pay or a week's pay. Better remember not to sin.
That's a very interesting concept. I love that. We should bring that point up. You should definitely bring that point up with practitioners. That's a very good point.
Well, the other thing is when I've actually said to them, you can use money, they said to me, no, the books, whichever book it is, says that you can use money only when chickens are not available. Now, 2 points. One, I said to them, isn't that a loophole if you are the reason that they're available? If you're causing them to be available by purpose breeding them for this, isn't that sort of like you're going against what the book says? And to that, they kind of shrug their shoulders like, nah, what do you want from me? Nothing's perfect. But secondly, to your understanding, does it say that, or does it say they can use either interchangeably?
I have read that that translation. That is one translation. I don't think it's the only one. I think because it's a translation, it is, after all, sort of left partially up to interpretation.
Yeah.
And I think, you see, back then, it was, you didn't have to go to a special place to get chickens like you do now. I mean, we don't have chickens in the city. We have chicken parts in refrigerators, but you don't generally see chickens in the city. So really, this is going out of their way to get it. So you could, in a way, make the case that they're not really available. Mm-hmm. We're going out of our way to have people get them for us.
Yeah.
Whereas money, we have. Another point that we can make is that, there are poor people who want to give what they call tzedakah, which is charity. They want to give this money for charity also, but they don't have a lot of money. Well, that obviously they can't afford to pay for a chicken to do this ritual with. So they can give 18 cents. The number 18 in Judaism represents
life.
Chai, which is life.
Yes.
Right. And you are giving somebody life. It's symbolic. So even people who have virtually nothing, most of them can afford to give 18 cents.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the symbolism that's so important. You're giving something that you really, you have no money, but you're giving somebody a little of the little you have, which is so commendable. Mm-hmm. And this way, everybody can afford to do the ritual, whoever wants to do the ritual.
Two quick questions for you, not to dwell on these, but where, okay, I guess this is a 3-part question. Where are these chickens coming from? Who is selling them, to us, and who is supplying them? How much are people buying these chickens for? And who is profiting off of this?
Okay, those are very good questions. And actually, they come from distributors. These are suppliers who get them from farms somewhere. We're not sure where the farms are. I know that the distributors are located either in New Jersey or in Queens. Some are located in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. So that's where I don't know where the farms are. However, some of the distributors in the past years have actually been Islamic ones. They've been Muslim distributors, and it's interesting. It's funny to me because halal and kosher are very similar. The laws for halal and kosher, the killing of the animals is they're very similar rules. But when I told certain practitioners, the distributors they were getting them from, they said, "Oh my God, no, it can't be," like they were so horrified. But yeah, basically now I think because people complained, they're getting them from Jewish distributors. But I mean, it's all the same thing. They all come from factory farms. They all come from terribly crowded conditions, and they're all unhealthy and obviously unhappy. They're treated like garbage. They're manhandled even before they get to the ritual. These birds sell from anywhere from about $6 to $7 to $12 or $13 typically. It depends on the establishment. And where the money is going is a very good question. Usually it goes right back to the people who are hosting the ritual. So, for example, Chabad will claim that it's going to their educational programs. If it's done outside of the yeshiva, because it's done, see, in my neighborhood of Borough Park, it's not done on a huge scale in one large place. There are a couple of big places, but not as big as in Crown Heights or Williamsburg. Most of them are done in little pockets, either in abandoned lots, parking lots, yeshiva grounds, like the outside of yeshivas, and in alleyways. And so who knows where that money is going? Into the pockets of the people hosting the Kaporos, I assume.
I don't know if you've done the math on this. I just did a little quick math. 6 to 13 per bird. That averages to $9.50 a bird. If last year 60,000 birds were purchased and slaughtered, this is $570,000 we're talking about.
Wow.
I mean, if instead of giving that, buying that chicken, if people would just give that money literally to the poor, we're talking over $500,000 that we could really do something with and really give some meaning to this ritual.
Right, exactly.
Instead, none of that money is being given to the poor. I mean, I can only imagine none of that money is being given to the poor because it's being given to the person. I mean, there's got to... I remember when I went to this protest 2 years ago, there was a man who was even telling the cops, he's like, what if I just want to spray down the streets right now? What if I want to wash down it's my sidewalk? What if I spray the sidewalk down? He was basically trying to get the police officer to allow him to hose us down to get us to leave.
Wow.
And this guy, you could tell he was livid more so than anyone else because we were upsetting his business interests.
Right, of course. Well, my house was attacked with red paint.
Oh.
The first year we did it, I had our banner hanging on the second floor of my house. I have a 3-story house in Borough Park. And all it said was the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos. And it had our website and an illustration of a man holding a chicken. And one night, Julian, my son, came in, and he woke me up. I was sleeping. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and he said, "Mom, did you see what they did to the house?" And I said, "No." And I ran outside, and there was paint all over my front door. This is oil-based, very pungent paint, oil-based blood red paint. They must have used a whole gallon because it was all over my front door, all over my porch, my steps, and even up down to the tree in front of my house. And I didn't even at first notice that they had obliterated our banner as well. But as soon as I saw it, I said, "Oh, well, we must have pissed somebody off." Probably, somebody in the neighborhood knew about our activities and didn't like it. This is their way of showing us that they don't like what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then I looked up and I saw my banner completely covered with red paint. And I said, "Oh, okay, then that's confirmation that that's exactly what it was. This was a deliberate attack, based on what we're trying to do, which is to just simply encourage people to use money instead of chickens."
Yeah.
It was kind of harrowing, and I was very upset by it. And to me, it showed that not only do these people who are doing it have no regard for animal life, clearly they don't have very much respect for people either.
Yeah. It sounds to me, trying to be objective here at the same time as I have joined you in these protests, but it sounds to me, and I can confirm this from my own experience, that these people feel like their religion is being attacked.
Exactly.
Well, how would you answer? How would you answer people who tell you that you are being anti-Semitic, or that I am being anti-Semitic by taking part in this protest?
Right. Or a lot of times they'll say, "You're a self-hating Jew" to me because I'm Jewish.
What? They've never watched a Woody Allen movie?
True. That's so true. But what I simply tell them is, this has nothing to do with Judaism. This ritual has nothing to do with Judaism. This is anti-Judaism. This puts us in a bad light. This puts Jews in a bad light, that we can be so barbaric, that we can actually torture animals, and do this for a nonsensical reason, with a nonsensical excuse that makes no sense. I mean, we have a Day of Atonement specifically to, reflect on our sins. A whole day where we fast and we say over and over again that, we are sorry for all the sins that we committed. That this is so unnecessary and ridiculous. This is not a Jewish thing. And you know what else I say to them? I say, you know what? The Christians believe that Jesus died for their sins. Isn't that what you're saying about these chickens? What are we, emulating Christians now? And they get very nervous when I say that. They're like, well, and they really don't have a comeback.
Yeah.
I say, these are Jesus chickens.
Yeah.
These chickens died for your sins. Why don't you call them Jesus chickens? And of course, they're so afraid of being assimilated and having their beliefs diluted that they get very upset by that. Like, they don't want to be considered like Christians. So I use that. I say, but this is what you're doing. You are emulating Christians.
Yeah.
And it's pretty funny. They get shaken up about it.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds to me, and I hear a bit of myself in this, there's definitely points in my life, and there will continue to be points in my life where I get so set in my ways, I get so set in my held beliefs. And I have to be aware that even as a vegan, I have to keep my veganism, my vegan box in which I think. I have to keep that box open so that I'm always open to new information and new ideas. I try not to hold my vegan ideals so in such a tightly clenched fist, but I try to keep them in an open palm so that I'm always open to shedding an idea and allowing a new one to come to me. It really sounds like we're dealing with a group of people that is so closed off to feedback, so closed off to ideas, It sounds like a really uphill fight. Do you have, what gives you hope, Rina? Why do you keep doing this protest, holding such vigil year after year, do you see us getting anywhere at
Yes.
ending chickens as Kaporos?
Totally. First of all, change never happens. Change usually does not happen overnight. But I am very encouraged by what I see. I see more and more people becoming aware of this. And for let's say about 16 or 17 years, I was going around by myself and trying to get people out with me. I could never do it. I contacted various animal groups, and finally one year in 2009, PETA sent me two people, and one was Philip Shine, and he was amazing. He was great. We went, it was the first time I had seen Kaporos done in Crown Heights on Eastern Parkway, where we go now to do our protests. And I was sort of shell-shocked because I had never seen it on that scale.
Yeah.
And it was pretty horrific because I saw dead and dying birds just being thrown under the truck that held all the crates of birds. And, birds panting and struggling to breathe. It was just horrible. And we were talking to people, trying to talk to people. We were giving out leaflets, and PETA had actually made up origami chickens made from money. I thought it was very clever that we were giving out to people.
Yeah.
And said, please use this instead of a real chicken.
Yeah.
So I was encouraged then because I said, wow, I got two people to come out with me. I'm amazed. So the next year, because I was so shocked by what I had seen, the scale of the operation, that I finally found United Poultry Concerns and Karen Davis and spoke to her about what I had seen, and we decided at that time to form the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos. Our first meeting was in June of 2010. Since then, we've been protesting. We do at least 2 to 3 protests every year. This year, we're going to do 3 protests. And with each year, we grow. And with each year, we collect more information and more articles. And we find that more and more Orthodox rabbis are now speaking out against it.
Yes.
One, Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, who is the head of a group called the Shamayim Va'aretz Institute, the Heaven and Earth Institute, wrote an amazing article for the Jewish Week. I think it was the year before last, and it was very eloquent and, really described the horrors of the ritual and pleaded with people to use money instead. That and the SPCA in Israel posted on their YouTube a guy, Rabbi Shlomo Aviner, who's also an Orthodox rabbi who spoke very emphatically against using chickens. And then we have Rabbi Gershom, who this year, what we're doing differently in our protests is we hired a moving billboard. It's a truck that has different images being flashed on the sides and the back of it. On the sides, we show the horrific images, and we ask in both Hebrew and English, is this a mitzvah, a commandment from the Torah?
Wow.
And we say, holding chickens by the wings is cruel and painful. Please use money instead. And we have on the back a big picture of Rabbi Yonasan Gershom, who's a Breslov Hasidic rabbi who has rescued chickens on his farm. He takes care of chickens, geese, ducks, and other animals, any species that comes his way. And he's holding a chicken, hugging a chicken, and he asks people to please use money instead. We also he sent us an audio file describing what the chickens are going through, saying that, how would you feel if you were picked up with your arms pinned back and being held up by your elbows? How much pain and fear you would be feeling. That's what these chickens are going through. And so this year we have that very dynamic thing. We also created, it's almost like it's a micro mini documentary. It's only 1 minute long, but to me it says it all. And I sort of called it a PSA, a public service announcement. We took his audio file and we matched it with photographs, and actually the photographs are by Carol Guzzi of the Washington Post, who did a photo essay of this in 2010, and she took some incredible photographs. So we have that in the video, and it's just really powerful. So this year, each year we grow a little bit. We also put ads in Jewish newspapers. We have put ads in the Jewish Press, the Jewish Week, in the 5 towns, and we also had ads online in the Forward and the Jewish Telegraph Agency and several Israeli newspapers, and also the Jerusalem Post. So we're constantly trying different things to get the message out. And each year, more and more people come over to me and whisper to me, "Thank you for doing this."
Wow.
And also, because my phone number is listed on our press release and it's posted on the Internet, I get calls of various types throughout the year, and especially immediately after Kaporos. Some, albeit very nasty and, yelling at me. The others are praising me. And these are from obviously from Orthodox people, and they say, "Thank you so much for doing this. We use money, and we don't have the courage to come to the demonstrations, but we support 100% what you're doing."
Wow. You have come a long way since it was just you by yourself, going out and holding vigil. It sounds like you've come such a long way. You are getting so many people from the other side, reaching back out to you and thanking you for what you're doing. So it really does give me hope that this is all leading to some good. There's got to be some bad as well. You're starting to get some angry phone calls as well. What is some of the backlash that you've gotten?
Well, it's just like when we're at the protests, they say similar things there, that, for example, we're anti-Semitic or I'm a self-hating Jew, and why don't we go protest McDonald's? Like, if you come to the protest, you'll hear that a lot, like, go protest McDonald's, they treat the chickens worse, and all this stuff. And we say, oh, we do protest at McDonald's. We protest wherever there is animal abuse. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. It's not picking on them specifically. We would go to protests against Santeria, animal sacrifice in Santeria, if we knew where it was being done. But there, it's being done in basements, and in back alleys, we have no way to know where it's being done. Yeah. Practitioners certainly are not going to tell us. The same thing with the Islamic holidays where they sacrifice animals. We don't know where it's being done, or else we would go there too. And not Santeria or the Muslims do it on such a large scale like this in one, in specific locations. Also, what people don't know about me is I lived in Israel as a child. Hebrew was my first written language, my first formal language. I grew up in a very progressive household where we were very much involved in civil rights. My mother was very supportive of the NAACP, and we had friends of every race, ethnicity, and we were very much against prejudice. When I moved out to Arizona when I was in junior high school, my mother and I moved out there for our health. I was the only Jewish kid in my junior high. when the white kids found out I was Jewish, they told their parents, and their parents didn't allow them to talk to me anymore. All of my friends were black, Spanish, Mexican, and Indian, American Indian. So there is where I really got a taste of reality, because I had grown up in Brooklyn, which was such a melting pot.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had friends of every ethnicity, to go out there where not only was I ostracized in my junior high, but we received hate literature stuffed into our daily paper by the American Nazi Party, the Ku Klux Klan, and the John Birch Society. And it was really a shock. So when I came back and I discovered the Jewish Defense League, I joined the Jewish Defense League. I studied karate with Rabbi Ben Levy. And I was a real active member of the JDL. So these people really have no idea about my background. I fight prejudice wherever it rears its ugly head, whether it's against Jews, whether it's against African Americans or Native Americans, no matter who it's against. I feel like I feel it personally. I feel it viscerally when I hear somebody uttering prejudiced words.
Yeah.
So that's the way I was raised. So to say that I'm a self-hating Jew or anti-Semitic is so insanely ridiculous. And all of my co-protesters, they are all involved in social campaigns and other animal campaigns. Nobody is picking on this particular ritual or these particular people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and it's not against the people at all. And it's not asking the people not to do the ritual. It's saying, please use an inanimate object instead of a live, struggling, suffering creature.
Yeah. This is a very heartfelt, well thought out response to a not very well considered retort that you have to hear all the time.
Another thing they say to me is, another thing they say to us is, Hitler was a vegetarian, which is absolutely not true.
It's absolutely not true, but I hear it all the time.
Yeah, it's a common misconception. And Wynne Berry wrote an amazing book called Hitler, Neither Vegetarian Nor Animal Lover.
Right.
And I suggest that these people, I always tell them, please read this book. You'll see Hitler was not a vegetarian. And do a little research on the internet before you come out with these false statements.
Just to anyone out there who's never heard that, there's someone listening to this right now who must be thinking, oh my God, I didn't know Hitler was a vegetarian. No, Hitler had a doctor or a nutritionist or a dietitian who recommended a vegan diet, but I think it was sausages, or there was something that Hitler loved so much. He's like, well, I could never give up such and such. And so he was not a vegetarian. Even if he was a vegetarian, killing people is not vegetarian. So you can't wear the vegetarian label when you're a murderer. Right.
And, another thing, to go back for 1 second to the Christian thing, I said the same thing. I showed up at a lecture in the Museum of Natural History one year when the Santerians, this Dr. Whippler, her name was presenting a whole panel of so-called experts on Santeria. Well, several of my colleagues from Transspecies and the ASPCA and I showed up there to counter what they were saying, because we went to they had a whole, I think it was a 5-part series, 5 different days. We went to the one specifically that dealt with animal sacrifice. And what we said to them, first what happened was some of my colleagues opened up big posters of what Santeria really looks like, the animals cut up and everything, and the blood and everything. And they got immediately escorted out of the museum. But what I did was I went up and said, at that point she said, Whippler said, she's only allowing one question for each person. In other words, we couldn't get up to the microphone and make a statement, but we had to phrase it in a question, kind of like Jeopardy, right? So I, when it came to me, because we were in line at the microphone, I went up and I said, I have a two-part question. I said, first of all, I said, why, since religion is such a spiritual thing, and, for example, the Catholics have the host and the wine to represent the body and the blood of Christ. They don't cut open a human being to simulate the body and the blood of Christ. They use the host and the wine, the wafer. And I say, so why not, instead of torturing an animal, cut open a peach and let the the juice that drains out represent the blood of the animal. That way nobody gets hurt. And I said, and the second part of my question is, how can you use an animal to get rid of sins when animals don't sin? Animals can't absorb sin. They don't have sin in them. They don't have that capability. Only man sins.
That's a good question.
And there was absolute dead silence in the crowd. And
I love you, Rina.
Nobody said anything. They were rhetorical questions. And as I walked out, because at the end, when we all left, people tried to attack me. And there were cops there, and there was museum security, and they had to pry the people off me.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And that just proves what we've known all along, that violence to animals, this is a well-documented fact, is related to violence against people. All serial killers, or most of them, start on animals. They practice on animals before they graduate to people, quote unquote.
I come from Jeffrey Dahmer's hometown. I went to some of the same bars when I was, I'll say it, a teen, that he went to pick up his victims. Now, that was many years after this happened, but one of the first things that they always pointed to was that before he started hurting people, he started practicing on animals. Those feelings he had, he started venting them on animals, and violence begets violence.
Exactly.
Rina, there's we have listeners all over the world, and I don't want people to listen to this and think, oh, well, this is just one more New York thing, just like one more awesome New York vegan restaurant that I have to listen to, but hear about, but I can't go to and enjoy. I don't want people to come away with the impression that this is something that just happens in Brooklyn, New York. What would you say to the people who live in, other parts of the world? How can they find out whether this is going on there? How can they get involved in this? What if there is no one speaking out against it where they live? How can they become their own Rina Deych and be that person to start a movement? And lastly, what would you say to the people who live somewhere where this is not happening? Does that mean there's nothing they can do, or is there something they can do to help spread the word?
Okay, I'll start with your last question. And one thing that everybody can do, regardless of where they live, is to sign our petition, which is on our website, and we're also circulating it on Facebook. It is on change.org, and you can find it on our website, which is End Chickens as Kaporos. And I don't have to spell it out because you'll put it as a link, I think, on the page.
If they're wondering as they're listening, Kaporos is spelled Kaporos.
Yes. And it's being done all over the world. We don't necessarily know exactly. However, we can safely assume that wherever there are Chabadniks or this Lubavitcher sect, that most likely they are using chickens. I would hope that some are using money, But one thing you can do to start is to go to the Chabad site, chabad.org. That's CHABAD.org. And on to the right-hand side of the main page, it says Chabad Locator. And if you put in your zip code or area, town, or country, it'll lead you to the Chabad Center in that particular location.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ask. You can call them or write them and ask, do you use chickens for Kaporos?
Wonderful.
And that's one of the main things. The other thing is, if you find out what the Hasidic population is, and just do a little research as to what synagogues there are in the area, you can write to any one of the Orthodox synagogues and ask them if they know if this is being done anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, if they do, you can send them our website. You can send them links to our website and to our petition, to our video, to plant seeds of compassion and let them think about, consider using money instead of chickens. So those are the main things. Since we don't know exactly, we do, however, know in Israel. We know that it's done in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem for sure, probably other cities in Israel. We are very much in touch with the Israeli animal rights groups like Chai and others, who also protest. They have their own protests. In fact, they have shared with us some posters that we are blowing up and making into professional posters for this year. So it's definitely done in Israel. In fact, last year, several activists were arrested at the demonstrations because they got so heated. One thing they do that's very interesting in Israel is they have a little booth, and they have people doing Kaporos with money, so that they ask people to come over to the booth and do it with money instead. And they have groups that they send the charity to whatever they collect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's something that people can do in Israel, is to join the protests. And of course, here, if anyone is in the New York area, to join us here. Now, I've had people, I went to a Mercy for Animals demonstration on July 4th against the hot dog eating contest in Coney Island. I met a lovely rabbi named Rabbi Eli Soifer, and he is Orthodox. He works in a yeshiva. He's a vegetarian, and when we talked about Kaporos, he said, "Oh yeah, that's awful," and he asked me if we would come to Monsey, which is upstate New York, and demonstrate there. And we're thinking of doing that for next year. It wasn't
Wonderful.
enough time for us to plan to do it this year, but hopefully that is something we would consider for next year.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically it's to seek out Hasidic groups, especially Chabad, and find out if they are doing it in those locations around the world.
Yeah.
And then you can contact us directly, and we will help you set up a little group, get people together, and we'll tell you how we started and what we did to since the beginning of the Alliance, and we'll help you get started.
So if people want to contact you to know how they can get involved, they can find that information through your End Chickens is Kaporos website, yeah?
Yes.
Excellent. And, lastly, I don't say this often on the podcast, but our listeners should know by now that we do have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/BigFatVeganRadio. And we have recently started posting, I believe now as of this episode, all of our episodes are now up on YouTube. So people who are listening to this, who want to share this information, they can also just go to YouTube and copy this YouTube video link and post it on Facebook, share it with their friends, friends, email it to their friends. They can share this interview as easily as sharing a YouTube video. So we'll make that YouTube. By the time that you're listening to this interview, people, you should be able to also find this on YouTube and share it pretty easily.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to mention one more thing.
Yeah.
The past 3 years that we've done this, because this will be our 4th year doing formal protests, we have rescued dozens of birds. Last year we rescued 70 chickens, and they were all sent to different sanctuaries. And sadly, these birds, because they're bred to be so overweight and unhealthy, many of them die within the first year. But many of them are still alive and thriving. And, for example, Woodstock has an adorable video of a rescued Kaporos bird whose feet were so mangled that he couldn't walk. They made booties for him, and he runs with the booties on. It's adorable. It's really amazing. So I just wanted to make that clear, that we also rescue as many birds as we can.
That's right. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. When I was at the rescue 2 years ago, or at the protest 2 years ago, here I was. I've never felt more helpless than I have at a Kaporos protest. You're watching it happen in front of you, and you're hearing the screams, and you're holding up a sign, but you're wishing. I'm wishing I could do so much more, and I felt like there was nothing I could do. And then I see the gorgeous Edita Bernkrant, and she is like crossing the picket lines, pulling the cop off to one side, like, all right, you want us gone? We want this to stop. Let's make a deal. And she and Rachel Kay, they like struck a deal with these people that like, look, you want us to go? Give us some chickens. And I forget how many, but they had carriers and boxes with breathing holes and getaway cars already. And the next thing you know, they're like, guys, we got the chickens, we're going. And I don't know how many chickens they got. And I heard so many people, even some people who were practitioners of the Kaporos ritual, sort of taunting us, saying, oh, you think 4 chickens makes a big difference? And I'm like, yeah, it makes a big difference to those 4 chickens.
Exactly.
I wish we could save them all, but the fact that we were able to save one, Exactly.
And I want to say something else. I want to say that I want to kiss the feet of every person who shows up at our protests. I know how hard it is. I've had people say to me, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. This is the hardest protest I've ever gone to. And I just really appreciate everyone who comes to our demos.
Yeah.
This is really, really difficult. I mean, what animal activists, or anyone who has any compassion, even if you're not vegetarian, anyone seeing this gets upset by it, to see these birds in such distress. And I say, for people who say to me, I just can't come, I can't stand to see them suffer. So does that mean that if you don't come, they're not going to be suffering?
Right.
The only way this is going to change is if you transcend that feeling, focus, and come help us. Help us scream out against this horrific injustice to animals. That is the only way it's going to change. And as much as you think it's hurting you to see it, it's hurting the animals so much more. The chickens are suffering so much more. And we have to keep that in mind. We're there for them. This is not about us. This is about them. And we have to do something to alleviate that suffering. And if we, I had someone say to me the other day, well, you're never going to change it. And this is always going to happen. And I said, yeah, you know what, you're right. So, you know what, let's not do it anymore. I mean, if we don't do anything, there's a chance in hell that anything is going to change.
Exactly.
So the only chance we have is to try, is to protest, sign petitions, share the information, share the short video, and let people know what's going on, and ask these people to please use money instead of chickens. That is the only chance we have to stop this. And see, as I said, I feel encouraged because more and more Orthodox people are coming out against the use of chickens. Two in particular, I named chickens after them, as a matter of fact. These two Orthodox women, Chava and Frady. And I named two rescued birds after them last year. And Chava, which is a girl's name, turned out to be Chaim, which is a boy. So it shows you how these people don't even know how to sex the birds properly.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
this could be completely null and void if they're using a male rooster for a female practitioner. Then, you know, it's void, you know. And yeah, many of these chickens are roosters, and the practitioners claim that they're hens. But anyway, the main thing is that we have to be there for the birds. We have to focus, and if anybody comes and takes pictures or video, what I say to them is try to focus on getting the right angle and not about what the bird is going through, so that we need to share this information on the internet. People need to see what's going on.
You know, I think it's such a wonderful point to end on, and I'd like to reiterate that point, as you said, that whether or not what we are doing can have any impact, or whether or not we believe that what we're doing is going to make a difference, we can be damn sure that nothing is going to change if we just do nothing about it.
Exactly.
And I think that's a wonderful point to end with. I think that's something that we got to repeat to ourselves every single day, because that's the kind of doubt, the kind of self-doubt that is always going to tempt us and is going to try to creep in through a different door or window or crack every day. And we have to remember that if we do nothing, we're basically allowing it to continue.
Exactly. And remember one thing, sorry, to make one last point.
Please.
Is if you come to the demos, there are all these people, all the protesters who are kindred spirits. We are all on the same page. We all want to end it. And I'll tell you something, it's a lot easier for me to do this now with more people on my side than it was when I was going for many years alone.
Yeah.
And trying to appeal to these people.
Well, you heard it here first, listeners. If you are planning on joining us at one of these protests, please go out first and get a pedicure, because Rina is waiting to kiss your feet. So just make sure you are literally putting your best foot forward. Rina, thank you so much for all that you do for the animals.
Thank you so much.
I can't even imagine taking on the charge that you have taken on and made your life's work. And you do it blissfully. You do it without ever complaining. And I just from the bottom of my heart, I can't thank you enough. And I don't know if you can feel it at this moment, but hundreds of listeners just wish that they could give you a hug. And if you guys are listening to this and you want to send Rina any love, just please post a little message of encouragement and thanks on our Facebook page. And we'll see that it gets to her. Rina, thank you so again.
Much. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Incredible. That is she, guys. Is she just incredible or what? Rina, again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us today on this interview. I really hope that as difficult as it might have been to hear some of this information, I hope that Rina has inspired you to do all that you can for the animals. You know, you never know where in your life you might be that one person to go out on a limb and to stand out on that limb alone until you are joined by more and countless others one day, you know, and all of that can really add up to making a huge difference from the animals. So Rina, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And to you, the listener of this episode, whatever is driving you to listen to Big Fat Vegan Radio, to want to go vegan, to want to do more for the animals, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you will end up doing for the animals as a result, for all of those who will be inspired by you, by the example that you are going to go on to set for others. I can't thank you enough. I would love to remind you guys that you can contact us several ways. You can call us at 315-VEGAN-01. That's 315-834-2601. That is my favorite way for you to contact us, because then we get to play your own voice, your own questions on Big Fat Vegan Radio. You can also tweet us or tweet about us on the Twitter. We are at Big Fat Vegans. You can email us at bigfatveganradio.com. I'm sorry. You can email us at bigfatveganradio@gmail.com. And of course, all of our contact info can be found at bigfatveganradio.com. There's a little doubt. Sorry. And of course, you can find our Facebook page at Big Fat Vegan Radio on Facebook. You can also check out our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Big Fat Vegan Radio. I would love to remind you to become a member, not just because it helps us out so much, and it does help us out so much, but you also will get some truly awesome perks. Just go to bigfatveganradio.com and click on Support Us for a list of ways that you can help us do what we do, even some ways that cost nothing. You can follow us individually on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Honey LeBronx, and Laura is at Lara Yaz, that's Larayaz, on both Twitter and Instagram. Please follow and subscribe to Laura's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Laura Yaz, and check out her 3 minutes about a movie. You can check out Honey LeBronx's Vegan Drag Queen cooking show. Just go to vegandragqueen.com. And as always, you can buy some of Honey LeBronx's world-famous medieval oil at medievaloil.com. That's MEDIEVAL oil.com. Just remember I before E, except after C. Today's medieval oil use. Recently, I had just a perfectly clear complexion until a mosquito decided to land on my face and take a bite out of my cheek. And who can blame that mosquito? I'm freaking adorable. If you ever see me in person, you're going to want to bite my cheeks too. So I went out the next day and I had a big red mosquito bite on my face. And I put a single dot of medieval oil on that mosquito bite. 12 hours later, you couldn't see it anymore. I put another dot, and 12 hours later, it was almost completely gone. So you can use it on bug bites. I also got a little, I hate to say this, but I got a little zit on my back, and I had my roommate put a single drop of medieval oil on the tip of a Q-tip, and he just dotted each little blemish with medieval oil. Girl, I ain't gonna lie, it burned. It burned ferociously. So be very, very careful, but it really does help as a sort of spot treatment on acne or blemishes. So I hope you weren't eating during that, because that just was not pretty. I'd like to give, as always, a shout out to Michael Heron, who gave us our lovely theme song. You can check out his work at michaelheron.com. Did I mention that he is Sandra Bernhard's personal accompanist on stage in her one-woman show? He is, actually today, Saturday, he is in Hudson, New York, playing on stage with Sandra freaking Bernhard. I bet you didn't know her middle name was freaking. It is. I would also love to thank the incredible Kelly Huffine, who gave us our logo and our cartoon. She is kelly42fox.deviantart.com. And you know who I'm going to thank next. Go ahead and thank her yourself. Miss Sunshine Villa, our official Big Fat Vegan sponsor. Sunshine, we couldn't do this. We could not do this without your help, and we wouldn't want to do it without your help. So a huge thank you to you for making sure that everyone can listen to Big Fat Vegan Radio. That's pretty much all we've got for today for Big Fat Vegan Radio. Do check out the show notes for this episode at bigfatveganradio.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please check out the description below. We're going to have a ton of links where you can check out more information that Rina is discussing here in the episode. So you can watch these videos, you can see firsthand what we're talking about, and so you can learn how you can get involved. Please subscribe to us through iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. Whichever podcatcher you do use, it's extra helpful if you can go to the iTunes Music Store and give us an awesome rating and a glowing review. It really helps iTunes bump us up in the recommendations so more people can find us. And be sure to let us know what you thought of this episode on our Facebook page. Send us a tweet, leave us a voicemail, or leave us a comment at bigfatveganradio.com. We love hearing from you guys. So I think I've covered all bases. That's pretty much it. One last thing that I would love to remind you guys. It's August 31st as I record this. If you are a New York City resident, the primaries to elect our next mayor are just days away. They are coming up on Tuesday, September 10th. And look, I don't want to get all political here. You know, as long as you vote, that's all that matters. Exercise your right to vote. But you must know that one of the biggest things we can do here in New York City is to make sure that Christine Quinn, yes, she's a Democrat. Yes, she's an openly gay woman mayoral candidate. And I wish we could have an openly gay woman Democrat as our next mayor. But Christine Quinn is the #1 enemy to animal rights in New York City. She is single-handedly keeping open the cruel, inhumane horse carriage industry. She has single-handedly blocked every single meaningful animal protection bill that has been introduced since she took office as our city council speaker. She will do so much more to ensure that animal rights are blocked if she becomes the mayor of New York City. And keep in mind, because she got a third term for Michael Bloomberg, she will go out of her way to make sure that she gets a third term, which means she could be our mayor until the year 2025, when I am a whole 25 years old. Imagine it. So one of the best things you can do is get out and vote this Tuesday, September 10th, and vote for anybody but Quinn. But do keep in mind, the best person right now to beat Christine Quinn is Democrat Bill de Blasio. So please get out the vote for Bill de Blasio, not only because he stands the best chance to beat Christine Quinn, so it makes most sense for us to throw our support behind him, but also because he is the only candidate who has gone on record as saying, the day I take office as mayor, so long, horse carriage industry. He is absolutely behind our efforts 100% to block the horse carriage industry. So please vote for Bill de Blasio. And if you don't live in New York City, please do everything you can to spread the word, to tell your friends in New York City to vote for Bill de Blasio. So, I almost forgot. There's one more thing. In addition to voting on Tuesday, September 10th, in addition to voting for Bill de Blasio, in addition to telling all your friends not to support Christine Quinn, and in addition to contacting Rina Deych and making sure that you do all you can to help us spread the word about ending the use of chickens as Kaporos. Rina, could you join me on this one? The most important thing that we want you to take home from all this, you guys, is if there's nothing else that you do today, remember, you can always go vegan!
Hey everyone, welcome to Big Fat Vegan Radio. We're podcasting from East Coast to West Coast to discuss veganism in all of its glory. I'm here with
Laura, shut up! You're not on this episode, okay? God! It's all about me this episode. Thank you.